Coming up, award-winning writer-producer Larry Karaszewski joins Illeana in just a minute.
Welcome to Popcorn Talk, featuring movie discussion, news, and interviews. Popcorn Talk. We talk movies.
And now, it's the I Blame Dennis Hopper podcast, starring Illeana Douglas. Eavesdrop with Illeana as she interviews Hollywood's most prominent players about filmmaking, acting, and what really happens on the set of your favorite flicks and TV shows.
Hi, I'm Illeana Douglas, and you are listening to the I Blame Dennis Hopper podcast. We've got a great show today. Larry Karaszewski, award-winning writer, and has written some fantastic films. Of course, recently, People vs. O.J., Simpson, and one of my favorites, Ed Wood. So I can't wait to talk to him. I would like to talk, because it's Monday here.
I'm Tamara Berg, your co-host.
Oh, my goodness. So
we've only done a few of these. We haven't gotten our rhythm entirely yet, so I just wanted to make sure people know who this random gal is. No, it's fine. It's fine. It's fine.
How could I be? We'll fix all that up. We'll fix all that up in post. It is Monday, and it's very early.
It is Monday, and it is
my
early.
Delightful co-host, and I'm here with Tamara Berg, my delightful co-host, who brings in snacks and feeds us.
I do.
I wanted to talk about something because over the weekend, I hate, and I feel very strongly about this. I don't like criticism of any kind. And I've been working on a script, and I sent it to someone, and they sent me an email, and they said, now, do you want any notes on this? And I said, no. I just want you to just tell me. I said, I just want you to tell me for clarity, does this story work? I made some changes. Does the story work or does it not work? And as I scrolled back through the email, they proceeded to give me a long critique of the script. And I just was like, this is not what I wanted. Like,
right.
Your opinion does not, that's not what I asked you to do. I just asked you. So you have to be very, for people out there doing things creatively, you got to be very, very careful when you're working on things, who to send things to, because everybody always, whatever you write, you could be writing the most original thing, and the first thing people want to do is, you know what this is just like? Well, this is just like the plot of the Andy Griffin show that I saw last night. Do you know that?
Oh my gosh.
And somebody once said to me, I was in a car, we were driving along, and I was talking about some project I was doing, and my friend said, he goes, well, you just want everybody to love you. And I said, yes.
Of course you do.
Yes, unconditionally.
You pretty much hit it on the head. Yeah, absolutely.
So how do you feel about criticism in your work?
Yeah, I mean, we could talk about both sides of it, because I have actually lost friends over critiquing their work. And, it was one of those things where I usually, and John, who's our one of our producers here sitting on the couch, John has also done this. When people say, I'd like you to read my script, or I'd like you to look at my work, I always ask them beforehand, do you want me to just tell you it's great? Because I can do that.
Right.
And I think that's an absolutely valid position to come from. If you're a vulnerable artist and sitting there going, you're the first person who's going to read this, I need a little bolstering, I think that's valid to say, and I would like you to just love me right now.
Yes.
And then I will say to these people, or would you like, a little bit of feedback? Like, do you really want some? And come at it from the place of helping and not being nasty, because some people do want the feedback. And, I'm one of them, for sure. I'm definitely one of the ones where I'd like to give you this, and I'd like you to just tell me it's awesome, and I'm awesome too. And that my hair looks good today.
And I'm one of those people, I never read reviews.
Right.
I did an off-Broadway play, and I could tell we were pretty much shredded.
Because other people read them?
It was a fantastic. One of these days this was a story actually that did not make it in the book. I was it was a play I did called The Moment When, with Mark Ruffalo, Kieran Culkin,
Oh, wow.
Phyllis Newman, Originally, Estelle Parsons was in the play.
So it's not in the I Blame Dennis Hopper book,
It
but
is
it will
not.
be in your next book.
Yeah.
It'll be in my, because it was a crazy experience about doing a play that was a work in progress. So each night we were going out with saying different words and
Oh, sure.
and in previews. And by the time we got reviewed, I mean, I didn't want to read the reviews,
No.
but I could tell
No.
the cast came in and they had read reviews. Mike Nichols famously was quoted as saying, it takes 30 seconds to read and 30 years to
my gosh.
forget.
Yeah.
So,
Well, the thing is that we are hardwired, from an evolutionary standpoint, to receive, hold close, and value the negative feedback more than the
Right.
positive feedback. And so I think that's absolutely true. We go, oh yeah, your hair does look amazing, but boy,
Yeah.
you're, whatever. I mean, we're just so hardwired to take that to heart so much more, which is, I think, a really good reason to not be reading reviews, because they can crush you.
I think so. For me personally, everything goes in my brain, so I start to become very self-conscious. I remember working with a director, and again, all my life, all the directors I worked with, and I wrote about an experience in the book where I had totally screwed up a scene completely, like a very expensive scene during Goodfellas. I got one line and I messed up my one line. And, Marty came running through hundreds of people. He goes, sorry everyone, technical difficulties. And then he whispered in my ear, he goes, don't do that again. And I said, I know, I'm so sorry.
Oh, that is I remember that one in the book. That hurts my stomach a little bit to read that.
Don't do that
story.
again. Yeah. And, and I knew as soon as I did it, but it so lasted in me that's the kind of care that you need with actors. And I've had done other experiences, as I said, working with directors where you're doing a scene and you hear the director going, what is she doing? What is she doing? I told her. What? I hate this kind of acting, or something like that. Or I had a director once say that I was doing a scene, and she said, he goes, you're too big. And I said, what do you mean? The acting is too big? And she said, no, you're too big. And I said, what does that mean? I said, well, the stage direction says she flounces into the room. I mean, I think I'm flouncing.
Right. As opposed to slinking.
Yeah. But so I kept doing the scene, and each time I would do the scene, she just would look at me and kind of shake her head. And the rest of the movie, I kept trying to make myself physically smaller. So even though she she said something in 2 minutes, and I remembered it for the rest of the shoot. I was only 2 inches big by the.
Well, and the other thing I was thinking about when I was thinking about criticism is, number one, it's an opinion, right?
Yeah.
And you have to consider the source of that opinion. So where are they coming from? Again, are they coming from a genuine place of assistance or help or kindness? Or are they coming from, like I think so many critics, I don't mean the critics as a profession, but someone who's critiquing,
Yes.
coming from competition, coming from, needing to push people down and that kind of thing. And so again, I think it's a thing where you have to really consider the source and realize that just because someone has this opinion doesn't mean it's right.
Well, I've seen so many people, and I write about this in my book, be killed by criticism from an acting teacher, when you're very vulnerable and you're doing something. And I certainly have experienced when I was in school, just people not seeing a speck of talent in me.
Right.
And I'm just undaunted. I'm just going to go on, but people do feel they have I think that it's not a critique. A critique is great, but an opinion, I don't care about someone's opinion. Their opinion is usually something negative that can potentially get in your head. It's very challenging,
Do you have a method for overcoming that?
I just try to remember all the times in my life where people have said, it's no good. When I was doing stand-up comedy, my roommate, I would do my jokes in the living room. I'd say, and as I said, he'd go, you are not funny. He says, it's not funny. And you go, I think it's funny. So you have to have a kind of belief in in yourself, and be extra, extra careful when you're putting something out there, because I think
Right.
that so much of it is a childlike belief in your own project. Every story's already been written. We're going to talk to Larry Karaszewski. Everything has been written, every plot. That
Right.
you're not going to
Invent something new.
Yeah, exactly. And so it's the way that you carry out something, I think, that that makes it special. It could appeal to you or not appeal to you, but in my that's why I always say to people, I'm not clarity. That's all I'm interested in for people. If they're reading something, is clarity.
Yeah.
I don't want to hear your personal opinion about if you like the story or don't like the story. I really
subjective.
yeah, I agree. I mean, if I'm reading someone's script about Star Trek, it's not my cup of tea, but clarity. Does this make sense?
Yeah.
And those are the kind of best notes that that I think. Except that when you're in a dressing room trying on a bathing suit, you look at another girl and you go, "Does this make me look fat?"
Oh, you got to be careful there too.
I know.
Well,
Want some clarity on that?
Ultimately, right. Ultimately, the thing about criticism is that we're artists, right?
Yeah.
So our our work comes from inside, and it's very personal, and so the critique can be a real confidence killer, and that's, I think, it's just wretched.
I miss-
to kill someone's dream.
What I miss is film criticism in the way that somebody like Roger Ebert, Gene Siskel and Roger Ebert used to, critique. But the whole now, swipe to the left, swipe to the right mentality of, thumbs up, thumbs down. I don't really appreciate.
Well, it doesn't do anything. It doesn't help your project either, because it's like being in the writer's room. If you don't have a fix,
Don't open your mouth.
Yes, and
Absolutely.
and again, I try. There's so much out there. There's way too much material, but I'll go through the Amazon Prime or the Netflix, and I try to, watch things and, see. Okay, I like this. I agree. I don't agree, but I try to get a general sense of what is out there. And like I was watching the new the Woody Allen series last night, which kind of fell in certain areas, but in other areas, it was, my goodness, Elaine May is amazing. I loved watching her. So I always try. I do. It sounds a little Pollyanna, but I absolutely try. I love movies so much, and I understand how difficult they are to make.
Yeah.
That I try to find, when I'm looking at something, unless I really just resent that they've taken my 2 hours away. I try to really look. I look at the scene. I study the scenes. I say, geez, I really like this production design. It's nice music that they used. I love the clothing there.
Yeah.
That was a great moment there. I don't feel anybody goes into anything trying to make something bad. So therefore, I always try to be sensitive when, watching somebody's film. I once had a very funny experience of film I was in, and I got invited to a screening, and I thought it was a notes screening. And at the end of the movie, this is a true story. My friend Wayne Fetterman, who's going to be on the show, we sat down and we were taking notes during the movie, and the lights went up, and I said, well, the first thing I want to say is that the first scene is very confusing, and the director looked at me and he goes, "Picture's locked." "Oh, it's locked." And I went, "Oh." Oh, okay.
Right. I'm just going to sit here and clap.
It's fantastic.
It's amazing.
But notice, again, I didn't go, "What were you, did you waste, what did you waste
Right.
4 weeks?" I
Right.
said it's confusing.
Oh my gosh.
All right, what's not confusing is our first guest,
Yeah, let's
Larry
bring
Karaszewski.
him
Let's bring him
in.
in.
Yeah.
Let's talk about some movies. I'm very excited. Larry and I once, Larry almost made my book. He almost made the Alive book. You can sit right here, Larry. Larry Karaszewski. Now, we met, truth be told, we met, you almost made my book, but my editor said I dropped enough names. He actually said that. He said I dropped enough names I couldn't because we shared, and I tell the story that I was on my way to do Alive, the film Alive.
Right. No, I was on an airplane, and you came and sat down, and I recognized you because I knew you as an actress, but I had made films by that point, but I wasn't a name. And you pull out Alive. We're flying in an airplane. She's pulling out Alive. She's reading Alive. And at one point, I was looking over like, you know, you're not allowed to read that on an airplane. That's just like
Yes.
that's a
Absolute cardinal rule.
right.
Right.
And I had literally written this story, but not remembering it was you.
Right.
And then I
'Cause
went.
we didn't really meet. I mean,
Yeah.
I told you this later on.
Yes.
I actually was just reading that last night in the book.
Yeah.
I was reading the Alive chapter, and it was you who said that.
Right.
And it was
Very
it was a pivotal moment in my life because I was gonna, I'd signed on to this movie. I was gonna be living on a mountain for 4 months.
Eating human flesh.
Yes.
Yeah.
That's
You're a
in the-
method actress.
in
You-
those-
you,
yeah.
You
Sure.
actually tasted some flesh.
In those
Sure.
days, we were dedicated.
Great film, by the way. I am a big fan of Alive.
Thank you.
You know,
Yeah.
that plane crash is insane.
I believe it's the greatest plane crash ever filmed.
Yeah, no, it's heartbreaking.
It took 4 weeks to
Wow.
film that. Can you imagine? I mean, they don't do that anymore. Literally 4 weeks. Like just as an actor, No, I mean,
Well, no, because there's a plane crash
Yeah.
sequence. So like, oh!
yeah. These are the
Right.
things you don't think about.
Yeah.
When 4 different planes, one was on a hydraulic thing
Oh,
and dropped
wow.
10 feet. I wrote about this experience. We were all strapped in, and Frank wanted to get Frank Marshall, the director of Live, wanted to get genuine fear reactions. So we got into this plane, and it dropped 10 feet in the air. And as it dropped, and we were all being filmed, everybody went, whoa! Yeah. And we cost them.
Which is why you shouldn't read it on an airplane.
Yes. I know.
It reminds me of John Waters, I think, in one of his books, talks about when he gets on an airplane and he's sitting next to someone he doesn't want to talk to. He always carries a copy of a book called Lesbian Nuns. It's a book about lesbian nuns. Just, you open Lesbian Nuns on an airplane and no one wants to talk to you. No one will even look in your direction.
But you're right, Alive would be a bad one.
Yes.
So, Larry, we always start this show out with, because I'm a huge believer in the wet cement theory
Sure.
of seeing the first movie. What was the first movie you saw? Who took you to
I'm
it?
not sure exactly. I remember the very first movie. I mean, I remember the first couple, perhaps. Like Planet of the Apes was really early on. A movie called They Call Me Mr. Tibbs. The sequel
Yes.
to The Heat of the Night was very early on. I was born in 1961, so I was like 9 or 10, like right at the beginning of sort of the 70s cinema. And my parents got divorced at that time. And my dad had me one night a week, but he didn't know what to do with the kid. So I would convince him to take me to the drive-in, and he'd take a 12-pack of beer or something, and he would drink his beers and fall asleep. And for the next like 5 or 6 years of my life, I would see nothing but 3 films in a row that were completely inappropriate for a young person to see, which I think actually is completely appropriate.
Yes.
But that time I was seeing things like. I saw Marlon Brando's Burn at a drive-in. I saw,
Wow.
Last House on the Left. I saw, Joe. I saw all these movies that you would never think, oh, let's take a kid to see that. But that's where I learned my love of cinema.
It's interesting, because I wrote about drive-ins, and my parents, same thing. It was cheap entertainment. We were having this hippie commune, so my dad had a truck and put the mattress in the back, and all the hippies and all the kids would be in the back of the truck. And again, it was like I described it as a kind of one long Altman movie. He'd wake up and you'd see a little piece of Serpico, and you'd fall asleep.
Absolutely.
And then you're on Patton. You're like, what's happening?
And the triple bills were completely random.
Yeah.
It'd be the sterile cuckoo next to
Yes.
next to some horror film, next to a kung fu movie. It just happened to be whatever 3 prints they got. There usually was some main feature that was kind of the newish movie, because drive-ins were kind of second run at that time.
Yes.
But the other 2 films are completely random.
And so did your dad like movies?
I think he liked movies. I don't think he had a passion for it. My mother had passion for the arts. I mean, my dad worked in a factory. My mom was a waitress. It was a very working class. Grew up in Indiana. But my mom always had always took me to theater. Always pushed me into the arts a little bit. My dad, I think, was kind of indifferent. But he was happy to. He had me one night a week, so he was happy to take me somewhere.
So when you were watching the movies, was there a certain point? I mean, the first people that I just recognized, for me personally, I always talk about this, Liza Minnelli and Richard Dreyfuss were my go-to.
Sure.
I was obsessed with Richard Dreyfuss. I wanted him to be my friend.
Sure.
And again, I saw him in a drive-in. It was American Graffiti.
Sure.
And I started to emulate and pick up, be obnoxiously fun. And that was I was, class clown, and I was, consciously emulating Richard Dreyfuss. And then in my heart, I thought I was Liza Minnelli.
No. I'm trying to look at you and say, like, Liza Dreyfuss. Maybe that's kind of close.
Not at all. But did you have people did you emulate or?
I emulated people more like I learned how to do the nunchucks because I was I like Bruce Lee,
Yeah.
and definitely comedy I got into the Marx Brothers really early on.
Yeah.
That was part of that early '70s Marx Brother revivalism where they took over college campuses and things like this because I was kind of pushing my parents to take me to these movies all the time. It became an obsession for me. So I would seek out films at the time, and so like Groucho was a big person at the time. Woody Allen was a big person at that time. But I think that's when you first start seeing movies as a kid, you identify with the actors in a major way. And I can remember the first time that I really put together that there's a mind behind the camera, which for me was The Conversation, the Coppola movie, where I was really affected by that movie. I think it's '74.
And that's a dense film.
Yes.
I mean, for a kid
Yeah,
to...
but so I must have been 12, 13, and I remember just sitting there saying, "Wow, there's someone's creating this."
Yes.
It's more than just I didn't want to grow up to be Harry Caul or or Gene Hackman or John Cazale in a movie, but I at that point I said, "Oh my God, who makes these movies?" And started paying attention to that.
I used to gravitate even towards the, I think it's, who's the character actor? Alan
Garfield.
Or
Gorowitz when he changed for like the 3 or 4 years where he decided to use his actual real name.
See, again, I think that why I would like somebody like Dreyfuss and Jaws is I could never dream. I wanted to be the star, but I could never dream that dream big enough. So I would look at Alan Garfield and go, wow, if I could even...
Sure. No, I was the same way because I started doing acting in Indiana a bit, and I was on a comedy show there, and for Indiana I was pretty good. When I came out to Los Angeles, I very quickly knew right away that I, at best, am the next door neighbor. Hey, who comes in to do straight lines for the other person.
So were you always did you have a bent towards writing or storytelling?
I was one of those kids who was obsessed with film early on. It was really almost anything to do with film. And so I had a little Super 8 camera back in the day, and I would make these little movies. And I was very fortunate that in this town in Indiana, there was a television show called Beyond Our Control, which was sort of produced and written and directed and acted by the local high school students. But it was actually on the NBC affiliate there. It was a half-hour show. It was kind of... a Second City, Saturday Night Live kind of thing, but it actually predates both those television shows. But it went on for like 20 years, and I was a part of that, and that was very influential for me. And a lot of people came out of that. I mean, for the small town in Indiana, it's like Daniel Waters wrote Heathers and Batman Returns, Dean Norris from Breaking Bad, the woman who invented Blue's Clues. There's people like that. So the guy wrote Toy Story 2.
And so you were already learning, in a sense, construction of story.
I was learning how to be professional. Because we'd write on Monday and Tuesday nights, we'd cast on Wednesday, we'd rewrite on Thursday, build sets on Friday night, film on Saturday, air on Sunday. And so I really almost feel like I didn't go to high school, even though I went to high school and no one was getting paid for this.
Yes.
It was like if you were there are people who go to some school that had the greatest theater department in the world, and so they lived their entire high school career in their theater department. I lived through this television show.
That's so interesting. I had a similar kind of a thing. Again, nobody asked me to, but I saw movies and then had the kind of understanding. My grandfather was in the movies, and then once I visited him on this film set. Being there, I became the official high school film reviewer, even though nobody asked me to do that. So I would talk to teachers about their opinions.
That's funny. I was a film critic for a brief period too, back in Indiana, because once I graduated from high school, I couldn't. I actually wasn't going to college. I mean, I'm the first person in my family to go to college. So I what's now called a gap year. When I was growing up, it was called not going to college.
Yes.
So in that gap year, I convinced the television station that was doing that comedy show to let me be the film critic on the nightly news. So I did like movie reviews for like in 79 and 80.
So we were talking about the 70s and what, everybody has an opinion about the sweet spot of 70s films. I just recently saw Joe because we had, it's an incredible film. It's very dark. But what is it about the 70s films and filmmakers?
There was sort of a huge freedom that was given American cinema at that time. A lot of it comes from the ratings board. A lot of it comes from the zeitgeist of America at that time, and so there was basically challenging cinema was actually the same as commercial cinema, which is almost never happens, where you were actually going to see movies because of the filmmakers, not necessarily the stars. People like from Scorsese to Altman to Coppola, the people who were almost still names today, to be quite honest. The films were consistently challenging and they were darker. And it's so funny because I show my kids these movies all the time, and they always die at the end. I think that people were so free that people didn't have to win always.
Yeah.
And so there's these dark endings that are just kind of amazing. And it's funny. I brought my kids. My kids are now 20, 23, and almost 21 now. But I was a big proponent in showing them. I said age inappropriate material, because there's a thing I think that happens now because there's so many channels on television that kids now only watch things that are aimed directly at them at all times. Where I grew up in an era where there were only 3 networks, and so you had to watch what was ever on. So you learned sort of like you'd watch an episode of Mannix, and it was not aimed at you, and you had no idea what was going on. But then, what the hell was that? And so you'd pay attention, and you learned that sometimes sometimes paying attention and watching something that isn't aimed at you can pay off.
That's a great theory, and I would even say, because I only had one channel. I grew up in the country, and then I'd go visit my relatives in Queens, and I would freak out because I thought that's what TV was, the Untouchables and Burke's Law, watching it with my grandparents. But even we would have the Children's Film Festival show, which was Saturdays, and we saw some. I remember seeing some very dark films, so there wasn't, like you were talking about, age appropriate.
I remember, actually, it was funny talking about television. I remember seeing Joe. You brought up Joe. I brought up Joe first, I think. But it was back before cable, and I lived in South Bend, Indiana, which is about an hour and a half out of Chicago. And for some reason, one of the Chicago stations were running Joe really early on after its run, like in '74 or something like that. But the only way I could get the channel is if I was actually standing at the television holding the rabbit ears. So I had to actually be part of the antenna to watch it.
That's such a great. I love that. See, I love those experiences when I used to watch Dick Cavett that way, and the only way it would work was on my mom's little portable television.
That's what I had,
in her bedroom, in the hall, halfway in the hall between the the bathroom and her room, and then I would have to I would have to tilt it, and then sometimes it would go out.
To translate to you younger people, it's almost like your cell phone when you go to someone's house and it doesn't work, so you have to go walk outside in the middle of the street trying to find where you can get the 3 bars. That was kind of the way you had to watch TV.
And then if you had that experience like I have, obviously when you work with these people, to me I call it, they're the people that were on my bedroom wall.
Yes.
Or I almost can't.
Yeah.
I can't take it. I'm gonna interview Dick Cavett in a couple weeks for Turner Classic Movies, and it's almost like, no, I can't.
Yeah.
It's
Be cool. Be cool.
They don't understand the meaning that they have for you, especially for me, just because it was just my life. It was my bloodline to an outside world. Did you have that experience?
Oh, absolutely. I mean, probably the best example of that is I made 2 movies with Milos Forman, and growing up in the '70s, and the impact that One Flew Over the Cuckoo's Nest had for me at that time was gigantic. And You know, and so to be able to actually make movies with him, to be in the trenches with him, was really, you know, what an experience.
What is he? Did he have any insights about Cuckoo's Nest? Because it's such a, that whole period for Jack Nicholson
Yeah.
is
It's kinda
incredible.
perfect,
The
yeah.
Last Detail,
Yeah.
Hal Ashby. Oh, there's a lot of my favorite filmmakers come out of the 70s.
Well, no, what I really got out of working with Milos was just that he, you know, he really believes in naturalism. He really believes in just, you know, how would people really be in that period. He's not one of those filmmakers who's constantly moving the camera, thinking like that. He's really thinking about the performances and the real people. And so, you know, he often will cast you know, in Larry Flint, for example, he'd cast a judge to play a judge. You know, he's more about getting, you know, he tries to cast so perfectly that he says even if they made mistakes, they're making the mistakes in character. And he's looking for that, those sort of unrepeatable moments that life brings you that film doesn't. That you know, it isn't just people reciting lines. It's not theater.
Another thing that I love about 70s films, it sounds like it's a little thing, but for me it's a big thing, is that people are talking and planes go by and somebody honks their horn during they're saying something very important, and they sit at a leather booth and it squeaks, and that was just part of the mood. They're taking a bath and you hear the water splashing. And I don't know if it's just because my ear has been so trained, but I find it very difficult sometimes to watch movies and everyone looks so clean.
Sure.
Everyone's very pristine. The sound is pristine. Is that something you ever...
No, I agree with you 100%. That's why I tend to sort of like, you know, lower budget movies now. You know, I'll go to like mumblecore films or that kind of thing, which has that feeling now. You know, that sort of sense of just being shot by people who really care about what they're doing. But trying to present a slice of life on film. Yeah, because studio movies just feel incredibly clean. I mean, they're, you know, the superhero stuff particularly. It's just, you know, it's not of this earth, literally.
Yeah,
You know?
I get my eye is so trained in these 70s films that they're shooting on location and you can see movie posters in the background.
Well, that kills me when I see a movie poster in the back. Two things that like make me stop, you know, in a theater or watching something on TV is when either they pass a marquee or they pass a movie theater. And I'm like, what poster? What was there? Or if it's a movie that's shot in Los Angeles and they're driving a car, and I'm always like, where are they? Where are they? Oh, that's Crescent Heights and Sunset. Oh my God, you know, Jack Lemmon just picked up the hitchhiker. It's Crescent Heights and Sunset or something.
Oh, that's one of my favorite things. I you know, when I would watch movies, I would make a point. Yeah, to, you know, that was the best thing when the VHS came in. You could actually stop the film and see where they, you know, and see where they were shooting. And do you have any favorite films from the 70s that you want to recommend for people? Filmmakers.
You know, let's see, things that might be off the beaten track a little bit. You mentioned American Graffiti, which was a big film for me, but actually probably a movie that's very similar to that I have a great deal of affection for is a movie called Cooley High, which was sort of the American International Pictures made kind of the black ripoff of American Graffiti, and it took place in Chicago, and it's got amazing performances by Glenn Turman is unbelievable in the film, and directed by Michael Schultz, and it's just a really great, terrific movie, and it's actually one of those things where I prefer it to American Graffiti, but not necessarily maybe even for the filmmaking or whatever, but it's like when I saw it as a youth, it reflected my life more than, say, the California car culture.
Right.
I understood sort of the Chicago streets better than I understood the California car culture.
A movie that I love is, I'm going to pull out two. One's pretty popular, Harry and Tonto,
Great movie.
which is the Paul Mazursky film. It just kills me, and it's, of all the road trip movies, that's my go-to road trip movie. And another movie I really, really love is Cinderella Liberty with James Caan. I don't know
Marsha
what
Mason.
And I'm a huge Marsha Mason fan, but there's something about that film. James Caan plays a sailor who falls in love with she's not really a prostitute, but she's sort of a bar floozy, and she's got a African American son. She doesn't know who the father is, and again, there's just a casualness about there. Nothing is, you know, a big square.
What's interesting about that movie, and I brought up Marsha Mason because I think she was nominated for an Oscar for that movie, is that she's so great in that film, and she winds up marrying Neil Simon. I think they were married. And she winds up doing almost nothing but Neil Simon stuff from like a few years on for the next 10 years. And it's a totally different kind of performance than what she gives in Cinderella Liberty, which is like you were talking before. It has that naturalism. She plays a girl in the streets, and in those Neil Simon movies, she's just rattling off jokes and doing her things. They're very good performances, but it's interesting to see how the marriage changes the arc of that person's career.
So how do you think, and I want to get into obviously...
Back to Harry and Tonto for 1 second. What's
Yeah.
amazing about that movie was rated R, which is crazy.
It was?
Yes.
What?
Can I cuss on this show?
Yes,
Sure,
you can.
yeah.
Go for
And they
it.
may have changed it in the actual version you can get now. I think it's Josh Mostel. Is Josh Mostel in that film?
Yes.
He calls, I think, Ellen Burstyn a cunt.
Ah.
And it was the C word got an instant R, and Mazursky wouldn't change it. But like 10 years later, for the home video release, I think they looped it to bitch, and so now it's because there's no reason. It's a nice movie about a guy and a cat traveling across country, and there's no reason why it can't be seen.
R-rated.
Exactly.
Yeah. Shout out to Michael Schultz. We should have him come on.
Yes.
Absolutely.
Great guy.
Yes. Also directed one of my favorite movies of the '80s, which is called The Last Dragon, which was an insane movie. Kind of takes place in a kung fu movie theater, and it's almost like a Rocky Horror Picture Show for kung fu movies. It's,
Fantastic.
it's a great film.
I have to see that one.
I do often do movies at the American Cinematheque. I'll have bring down a guest and show 2 films, and I showed Cooley High and Last Dragon, and brought down Michael Schultz.
Oh, fantastic. Yeah, he's a great guy. Great guy. You are a Golden Globe and Emmy winner.
Yes, I am.
Correct? Yeah. So I want to talk a little bit, can we talk about your writing process? Illeana, you were particularly fascinated with the biopic and
Yes.
how your process has kind of like turned it. Can you talk about that?
A reworking of the biopic.
I have a writing partner. My writing partner is Scott Alexander, and we've I don't know if it was on purpose, but when we started our writing career, we were sort of writing studio comedies.
Problem Child.
Exactly.
As featured in... It's the other thing we
That's
have in
right,
common.
Cape Fear.
As featured in Cape Fear. Specifically chosen by Martin Scorsese.
Please tell me a little bit before I get into my thing. Tell me a
Yes,
little, because
do.
it's always been our gigantic curiosity is because at that time in our career we were the shitty guys who wrote Problem Child, and so the only thing we had going for us is some reason Scorsese uses it, and the movie Cape Fear shuts down for like 30-40 seconds, and you just watch Problem Child, and Max Cady laughs his head off at it. So for us, that was just some kind of sign of like, oh yay, maybe Scorsese at least saw it.
Well, and here's the thing about, Martin Scorsese. Yes, nothing is ever accidental in a frame of his film.
Sure.
You know what I mean? If he looks at your shoes, we gotta start on the shoes and come up, So I remember, yes, when we were doing the movie, and it had to be a Universal film, because it was a Universal movie, and he very specifically, with great seriousness, went through a thought process of what film Max Cady would be, would be watching.
Sure.
And-
What movie that Max Cady and Juliette Lewis would probably both be at.
And the idea that Bob would be laughing, hysterically, truthfully, not fake laughing at watching this film. But no, Marty thought it was a very funny premise and very funny. Do you remember the brief thing of Marty in The King of Comedy where Tony Randall is talking about the monologue,
yes.
and he's going, it's not funny, and it cuts to Marty. He goes, I think it's very funny. It's very funny. That to me is he's not the person in the back of the cab in
That's funny.
Taxi Driver.
Yeah.
He's the person who's he's got an amazing sense of humor and very funny. And
Well, the person in the back of the cab of Taxi Driver probably likes Problem Child too.
Yes. but yes, very, very specifically picked Problem Child. Which is
yeah.
exciting.
So anyway, back to
Yes.
your question.
Yes.
Which was we found ourselves in this weird career thing where we'd come in to pitch a movie and people would go, "Oh wow, that's a great idea for a movie," but you guys are the guys who wrote Problem Child. It's like, you maybe, we were sort of being told we weren't good enough to write our own ideas, which was really kind of scary and freaky.
Wow.
So we decided, even though the Problem Child was a big hit, we weren't that proud of the movie. But
With
it was a big hit.
sequels.
Yeah, with sequels. We sort of said maybe we didn't start our career the right way. Let's go back and regroup and try to write something just from the heart. And we wound up writing Ed Wood because we were kind of obsessed with Ed Wood when we were in college. And this actually touches upon something I think you guys were talking about earlier. We decided we were going to take a different view of Ed Wood, because at that time Ed Wood was just a source of ridicule.
Yes.
And people would go to those movie festivals to make fun of him. They're bad movie festivals. It was like the worst movie director of all time. And after our Problem Child experience, we sort of said, what if you look at him sympathetically? Because nobody sets off to make something bad. Ed was actually just trying to make the movies he wanted to see. They didn't turn out that well, but Ed believed in them. And so what if we concentrated more on his passion and more on his belief? And my God, a lot of people come out to Hollywood and don't get any films made. He made a series of films, and he gave all these people in his life a sense of purpose, and particularly a dying Bela Lugosi, someplace to go and believe in themselves again. And so we wrote it as kind of a love story between Ed and Bela, and really kind of reframed it as a story of a very passionate person. And that movie came out and it won a couple Academy Awards, and it really redefined us in a bit. But because of our Problem Child experience, because of being typecast before, we realized that we probably would have another, we were like, oh my God, this genre we can kind of be typecast in the sense that we knew we could maybe get at least one more weird biopic kind of made. And we thought biopics were one of the things that was a genre that doesn't get redefined very often. They're really kind of boring and terrible usually. They're usually those sort of Oscar bait 3-hour cradle to the grave things.
Yeah.
And we thought, if we came in there with a different attitude, we could kick its ass a bit. And so that's how The People versus Larry Flint happened.
Was it hard to convince studios that you were going to look at them in a different way?
Well, it was weird. It's funny, when Scott and I write conventional scripts, we have trouble getting them made. When we write these really unconventional things, we've actually had quite a big success with them. So I remember telling one of my friends that we were going to go out on a pitch about the man who publishes Hustler magazine, and they just thought, you guys are insane. How can you do this? And that time it was Columbia Pictures, and they got what we were trying to do. Columbia Pictures where Frank Capra made all his movies in the 30s, and I remember one of the executives saying, we always have these meetings and how can we make a Frank Capra movie for today? And you guys just came and pitched a Frank Capra movie with pornography. And I was like, yes, we did, as a matter of fact. That's exactly what it is. It's a story about the little guy taking on the government, taking on society, and winning. So what made us happy to sort of stay in the biopic genre, which is we sort of turn it, we call it the anti-biopic, sort of the biopics of people who before us kind of would never be thought of to be substantial enough to make their own films. Before it was Gandhi, it was Patton, it was that kind of thing, Lawrence of Arabia, and so we were sort of able to take a look at this thing and say, no, it's sort of the fringe pop culture elements of my life, the people that I love to talk about, the people that I'm sure you guys talk about in your podcast.
Yes.
Those people have interesting stories too.
Well, and that's one of your maxims, Illeana, is everyone's life is
Correct.
like a movie. We all have, these monumental moments, these first act breaks, we have the Dark Night of the Soul. We all do.
Yes.
We
Yep.
do.
Ed Wood is one of my favorite films. I love the film because it really, again, just demonstrates, people's passion for film, what they're willing to do to make a movie. And there's some crazy drive that we all have, and I think that's what the movie really expresses. And sorry. Go ahead.
It's interesting because my writing partner Scott Alexander worked on a bunch of low budget horror movies in the 80s, and when you're making those movies, no one's getting paid.
Yeah.
They're there just because, oh my God, they love movies, and they want to be a part of it. And oh, you're shooting in 35. Oh my
Yes.
gosh. And so you are literally, your boom mic is a broom with a microphone on it. And so it's these things, but the people are there with such great intentions. They are there because they love movies, and they want to
Yes.
make movies and be a part of movies, and they're willing to work for free. They're willing to work 20-hour days. They're willing to do whatever it takes. And so we actually took that kind of experience and put it into Ed Wood.
I agree. And they're one of the scenes that I think of mentally, which is one of my favorite things when you're on a film set and you think of a movie about movies, because I love movies about movies. But the scene with Bela Lugosi where he has to get into the and fight
with the octopus in the water.
It's such anyone who's an actor, like we at 3:00 in the morning, and you're like, I did one of those shark movies.
Oh, those Sharknado things?
No, it wasn't even good enough. It was below. No, it wasn't even.
Yes.
Forgive me, Sci-Fi Network.
Right.
But I love show business. I'm a student of show business. I want to do. The only thing I've never done is a soap opera. I want to experience everything in show business. So I got offered this crazy shark movie. I said, I'm going to do it. It was beneath a Sharknado. I couldn't even understand the script. It didn't even matter. And I remember at one point saying to the director something about, I said, it's 4:00 and we still have like 8 pages. Are we going to be shooting this tonight? And he goes, oh, hon, we're done. And it was just like, that's what he meant. Like, I mean, we don't get to it today. It's not going to be.
Oh, that's hysterical.
It's not going to be in the movie. Wow. So yeah.
Well, it's interesting. I'm glad you brought up the Bela Lugosi in the water scene. It's one of our favorite scenes as well. And just to show you a little bit of our writing process is that we outline kind of meticulously. We do a lot of research on these real life people, but a lot of times there's information we'd like to get in the movie that doesn't have a card or doesn't have a scene, and we call them like fun facts or whatever, and we just keep a list on all the various characters. And there was the fact that Bela Lugosi turned down Frankenstein after Dracula. He was offered Frankenstein and turned it down because Frankenstein didn't talk, and it was like, why am I just going to be this grunting monster? I'm Dracula. And so we're writing the script, and every 2 or 3 scenes, we'd be like, all right, what should Bela say? Hey, can you do that? No, he can't talk about Frankenstein here. It doesn't make sense. So we're writing that scene where Ed's filming all night long. Bella's shooting up in the car. Ed gets him to come out, and he's supposed to battle this octopus in this cold lake. And we were like, he talks about turning down Frankenstein. And so that became the idea of like, I turned down Frankenstein. And here I am now. And so it gives that scene a whole flavor that it wouldn't have if it was just we're making fun of the fact that Bella's got to do an octopus.
Oh, I've in my career I've shot scenes, with people. I remember doing a movie, and there was a woman who was going to be an extra in the scene, and we had to run through her house in the middle of this fight, and that woman was Carol Lindley.
Oh wow.
And it's gut-wrenching for somebody like me that loves movies, and nobody knew who she was. And she was only doing it because she was trying to get her insurance, because she didn't have and it's, people don't understand the sacrifices that you make to be in films.
That's why Tim cast Martin, because Martin was actually on a big upswing at that point. But Tim was like, he's worked with Hitchcock, he was in the Actors Studio, but he also did Harlem Globetrotters meet Gilligan's Island. So his guys had like a weird, he knows the bottom rungs of show business, he knows the top rungs of show business, and he thought that Martin could bring that to the Bela Lugosi part.
Yes, he did. So in talking about the biopic, you were talking. So let's talk a little again about your process. You do a ton of that's what I read. You do like a ton of research, and then now you have to narrow it into a kind of a 3-act structure.
Well, that also, definitely a 3-act structure. We sort of believe that you can do unconventional material in a more conventional kind of way. It's, that's strange enough. I think that's why we've been able to get things through the studio system, is that we've. Like I said, we've had strange stories, but told in a way that, like, oh, the studio executives reading it say, oh, page 10 that happens, or end of the first act that's there. We sort of try to play by their rules, but with our content, and all I really care about is the content, to be quite honest.
So when you say, I mean, we all hear this phrase, 3-act structure.
Right.
Can you just break it down a little bit for people that don't kind of understand the mysterious?
I mean, there's all kinds of
why it's so
screenwriting.
important.
It is. I certainly believed in it a lot more, I think, in my youth. But maybe it's because I did TV this year, and so now I had to do 10 hours, which was a totally different aspect entirely.
People versus O.J. Simpson.
Correct. Thank you. And so that really that sort of like opens up a different possibility for screenwriting, a bigger canvas. 3-act structure sort of is, that kind of, simply put, beginning, middle, and end, but they have a certain point that you're sort of an inciting incident. You're sort of building the story to, what it's really about, and then, the middle section is all the different complications, and it leads to a very bad thing that sets them off on a sort of a journey of self-discovery of some kind.
Do you ever have a thought that has anything ever changed for you? Like you start out thinking it's about one thing and then come to a different idea about it, or you're always pretty sure of the story?
I think we're pretty sure of the story before we start. I mean, there's certainly things that bubble up. In the People versus O.J., for example, the Robert Kardashian character is not that prominent in most of the books written at the time period, because Robert Kardashian was the unfamous person as part of the Dream Team. And so, in all the accounts, he's not given that much to do. But the more we looked at him, and obviously taking into our mind the success his daughters have at this later date, we could see that he was the only person at the O.J. trial who was there for the right reason. He was there because O.J. was his friend, and O.J. looked at him and said, "I didn't do it." And yet, if you do just some research, you realize that at a certain point, Kardashian had real doubts about his friend, because he was friends with Nicole as well. And so that was one of those things where that was actually during the writing that really came up. And particularly after we cast David Schwimmer, it was like, let's give him something to do. Let's give, and so that a lot of that stuff, a lot of that heart stuff in the O.J. show came later.
Did you have any concern about casting David Schwimmer because he had a kind of comedy background? I thought he did an amazing job.
I'd never have a concern about a comedian doing a straight part. Because comedians are the best actors around. They know more about timing and more. I think comedians can do drama much better than dramatic actors can do comedy. If you Alexander Payne is a big believer in this. If you ever watch an Alexander Payne movie, all the smaller parts are done usually by comics or comedic actors, because he knows that they know how to, like, let's put a button on this, or whatever. They know how to do it.
I'm obsessed with small, as we started the show. I'm obsessed with all the small characters, because sometimes one person having one line can ruin a scene if you get them from central casting. So one of the things I read about the People versus O.J. Simpson is that each, which I thought was extraordinary. I was
Thank you.
just glued to, because it's not, again, having been involved in many procedural courtroom television shows, it's death. It's just, for anyone out there, it is the most boring, hard thing to shoot, because you shoot everything one way, and then you shoot everything this way, and then you turn around and you shoot the judge, and scenes can take, you can have 16-hour days just doing the same thing again and again and again, and it's boring, and so I think that the concentration on the characters, the personalities of these characters, the way it was shot with zoom-ins, and you could see what the person was thinking. I was glued to it.
I mean, I think a lot of people were expecting a courtroom drama, which it certainly is, but we don't even start the trial to the 5th episode or something. So there was, we were never trying to just simply recreate what happened in the courtroom. We were trying to show you things you maybe didn't know, or show you different aspects, or certainly show you different. Try to let you have some kind of sympathy for almost every person there. They were all there for different reasons, but they try to get inside their heads and show what they were going through. We were very happy that time and time again someone would come up and say, I always hated Johnny Cochran, but I understood him after this, or I always hated Marcia Clark, but I didn't know what she was going through, or Chris Darden was the same thing, So we sort of were able to take these characters, real people, and maybe give them their dignity back.
Another thing I thought was extraordinary about the film is it's very hard to play something where you know the outcome.
Right.
And make it still be dramatic and interesting and compelling, right?
That's the inherent problem.
Yeah. It sounded like more of a problem than it actually was, in that, first of all, because we were able to, I think, put in so much stuff you didn't know. I actually, this is my first television thing I've ever done, and so I didn't know, when you have a movie opening, you go, get all your friends and you go opening night, and so I thought like, every week I'll have some friends over and we'll watch the episode, and I stopped that after week like 3, I think, because it just was, that really happened, man. What did they? Really, you made that up, right? And so I was having to do this like sort of commentary track over the entire thing. Yes, it really happened. Okay, yeah, we did. And so. We were always trying to find a different way to look, show you something you didn't quite know. But it was interesting. We were always worried about the last episode, the verdict, because people knew the verdict, and how could that not be just an anticlimax? But what we found was it was more like United 93, where because you knew some of the things were going to happen, it actually just put a gigantic knot in your stomach, and you were about ready to vomit the entire time as you're watching. So I think a lot of times having people know at least the rough outlines of history helped us be able to tell the story quicker, cleaner, and go more for character rather than plot.
Another, again, pivotal little tiny moment, but that was brilliant. See, it's the concentration on the small details when, Marcia Clark gets her perm.
Sure.
It's just brilliant.
Yeah.
And again, when you wrote the script, was that something...
Oh, absolutely.
The focus on that.
Oh, absolutely.
And why it's important.
Well, because certainly having the 20 years go by, you're able to read all this material and just look at it differently. And one of the things that just kept on popping out to us was how Marcia Clark was treated differently as a woman on this case. And so really early on, Scott and I decided that one of the episodes we'd call Marcia, and it would be just almost concentrating on her dilemma. And it was so interesting to have it come out the same year that Hillary's running for president, and I felt like the parallels were quite obvious. Just like just being held to a completely different standard. No one was talking about F. Lee Bailey's haircut, or how frumpy he looked. But they were constantly critiquing Marcia for what she was wearing. It's like Hillary's pantsuits.
And working with Cuba Gooding Jr. too, which again you have a performance that Andy Griffith, when he did after he did The Face in the Crowd, did you ever hear him interviewed? He goes, I never want to do anything like that again. It so disturbed him.
First of all, he's amazing in that movie. He's amazing in Face in the Crowd, and it is funny how just like he just became Andy Griffith. He became the nicest man on earth.
Because he said it was too upsetting. It was too disturbing for him. And I wonder, when I looked at watching, he was in the zone. He just was.
Well, we were so lucky. All those actors,
everybody was in the zone. Again, it's.
You talk about so you talk about like your little character actors that you love. For me, one of the greatest joys on it was. Having Bobby Morse play Dominic Dunn, and so it was just like to be able to hang out with Bobby and what's funny about like a character like that is, and you're an actress, you'll get this, is everyone was excited about being a part of this project, and they all want to be members of the dream team or be like Dominic Dunn in the thing, but what they didn't quite think through was that they would have to sit in the courtroom while Johnny and Marcia give speeches.
Yeah,
And so, yes, those first couple episodes, you got a lot of lines, and you're this and this,
Yeah.
but at a certain point, you're just a thing. And so all these big actors, had to fight the fact that they were like, I'm an extra here.
Yes.
And
Right.
so they were really good about it for the first bunch of weeks, and then there was a little bit of a revolt, and we had to sort of figure out, like, all right, we have to, we'll stagger them. You get Monday and Tuesdays, you come in these other days, and so, but Robert Morse is amazing. Robert Morse was like, I'll be there every single day. I don't have to give me lines. I'm gonna be there. I'm gonna sit next to the Goldmans. I'm gonna take my notes. I'm gonna be my character, and I'm gonna be Dominic Dunn. So he was, he's there all the time.
He was incredible. So now let's talk about the other biopic. Now, I'm just realizing, are you the only writer who has 2 films called The People versus?
Yeah, I know.
Yeah.
It's crazy.
Is that
yeah.
People versus Problem Child?
People,
3?
yeah.
Where-
Dr. Kildare.
You guys you're the people guys.
The people versus guys.
Right.
Well, it was one of those things where it was funny when we. It's kind of the co-title to Jeffrey Toobin's book that we based on. It's called The Run of Your Life: The People versus O.J. Simpson, and it was never our intention to to just sort of rip off our earlier title, but it just felt right.
Yes.
And so we did it, and so I'm quite happy.
Well, what are you working on now?
We're actually adapting Jeffrey Toobin's next book, a new book about Patty Hearst.
Oh,
We're doing that as a film,
right.
so we're just about to turn that in right now.
Any insights on the?
That's for our next podcast.
Oh.
Okay? I don't like that. A lot of times you wind up talking about things and you're like, and then 4 years later when it actually comes out, you don't have anything to say.
The couple just last question I want to ask you is just because we didn't talk about it all, just the partnership aspect of writing and what that
Yeah.
feels like.
Yes.
I always thought, my goodness, that would be an amazing. I mean, I would love. That was my fantasy, to look Billy Wilder and Charles
Sure.
Brackett.
Sure. We've always done it that way, and like I mentioned before, I grew up on this sketch comedy show, and so I was used to writing in a room with other people. And Scott and I were roommates at USC, and we wrote a script our senior year that managed to sell a few weeks after we graduated. And so I don't think we ever thought of ourselves as going to be lifelong partners, but we kept on. I think it works, and I think we really each bring something else to the table, and it's a nice yin yang thing, and. We work in the room together. It's not like you take the first act, I take the second act, and I'll see you in April.
Right.
We battle over every line, and we talk back and forth, and he sits at the computer, and I pace.
You're the pacer.
I'm the pacer,
Yeah.
or Scott would say he's on the couch. He's like, don't lie to them. You don't pace. You sleep.
How much do you write a day? Do you have
You mean time-wise or
Yeah.
page length? Page length, you never know.
3 words
Yeah,
sometimes.
exactly. 3 words at 5:30.
Yeah.
We tend to write. We have a kind of a weird hours where it's like 11:30 to 6:30 or 11:30 to 7, something like that. Sort of not traffic hours in Los Angeles, and so it allows us to have a little bit of morning. I think maybe it'll change eventually, but it was when we had kids. You could take the kid to school, you could do all that kind of stuff, and then go to work, and then come home and have dinner at the same time.
and then the last question too, I want to, because I'm there's so many things I want to ask, but 2 projects that I heard you were working on. You mentioned before the Marx Brothers, also a Monkeys project.
That's right. The Monkeys thing hasn't quite been announced, so I probably can't talk too much about that. But the Marx Brothers was Scott was also a little kid who loved the Marx Brothers, and we wrote a kind of a big epic Marx Brothers script for Universal in like 10 years ago. That's no longer in development. That's sort of strange enough. That is like it's too bad. Like I was saying before, we write sort of anti-great man. Marx Brothers is probably the first great man story that we wrote, where it's like these people do deserve a biopic, and so it was. But it's a very good script, but you got 5 brothers, you got Minnie, you've got a lot. It was one of those things where it was never. There's not really a cheap version of it. It's sort of, I wouldn't call it Gangs of New York like, but in the sense that they're always on a train going to another vaudeville place, going to this place. So there's a lot of theaters. There's a lot of
It's one of my
yeah.
sweet spots is,
Amazing.
again, movies about vaudeville.
Yeah.
My grandfather was in something, they were called the Jesse Bonestell Players.
Oh, wow.
You can Google them. But Gail Sondergaard was in the group and Ralph Bellamy.
Wow.
They all
I'll
made-
give one plug for one of my favorite movies that no one ever talks about anymore. It's
Sure.
a Bob Hope film called The Seven Little Foys.
Oh, the greatest.
Yeah.
Seven little.
The Seven Little Foys.
The
about-
greatest.
About
Right,
Eddie
right,
Foy.
right.
The greatest.
Yeah.
I send the scene with him and Jimmy Cagney
Yeah.
dancing on
Yeah.
the I said that.
Jimmy Cagney playing George M. Cohen.
I send that YouTube thing to people because I said this is the essence for me. If you could distill show business, the joy, just the simple joy.
Yeah.
Remember in movie in the old days, like Bob Hope would come on, and as soon as they do the soft shoe, everybody would applaud. It was like an instant.
Yeah.
So, we're all united. I don't know if we have that anymore. Well, anyway, Larry, thank you so much.
Thank you guys.
We definitely
being
need to
here.
have you come back. It
That
was
sounds good.
amazing
Please.
chatting with
That
you.
sounds good.
You can buy Illeana's book, I Blame Dennis Hopper, now out in paperback
Out in
in
paperback.
bookstores and also at Amazon. And you look at our website, Illeana'sPodcast.com. Also like us on Facebook. Go, lady.
Larry, you're also you're writing for Trailers from Hell.
Oh, Trailers from Hell is a cool website
Fantastic.
run by Joe Dante, where he has filmmakers like myself and Edgar Wright and Guillermo del Toro and Josh Olson and people like that. We sort of comment on our favorite films and our just weird movies in general. So go to trailersfromhell.com.
I love it.
Educational as well as entertaining.
It is. It
it's
is.
Great.
I love. There's so many resources now to see movies, but what I miss is the curation.
Sure,
of films.
correct. That's the
So-
most important thing right now. I think is people curating, people. We're in this era of choice, and so
Yes.
there's almost so
Indeed.
much choice. You need someone to say no, this is the good one.
Yes.
Like the Seven Little Foys.
Ah,
If you're going to watch a vaudeville picture, go straight to the Seven Little Foys.
I love movie again. Sweet spot for me. Movies about vaudeville. All right, folks. Your life, as I always say, is a movie with a beginning, middle, and an end, and this is our end. I'm in my third act.
Yes.
Just today. Just right now.
I just hope there's a happy ending. That's all. I'm just.
You're
I'm
going to
just-
die. I'm sorry. You are going to die.
No, I am.
Stop with the bad
let's say
news
that.
already.
Have a great day.
Thanks,
All right, take care.
everybody.
Bye-bye.
Thanks.
From producers Maria Menounos, Kevin Undergaro, Phil Svitek, and the entire Popcorn Talk Network, we would like to thank you for tuning in. For questions or comments, be sure to visit popcorntalk.com. I'm Sir Richard Wentworth, and this has been a presentation of the Popcorn Talk Network.
The views expressed herein are those of the hosts only and do not necessarily reflect the views of the Popcorn Talk Network or its owners or principals.